Right. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Laszlo.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you? I'm wait a second, walking around, so in case I have to plug my iPad in.
Yeah. We miss you today at the meeting.
Oh, I know. It's my favorite meeting.
Yeah.
Let me see. I've got to get near a plug. And if I get near a plug, okay, maybe this will work. I was thinking of being outside.
Yeah. Oh, Kah-Wai, you need introduction? I think the people who are here, they would remember you.
Yeah.
From last time. And I think it's all yours now. So I just want to ask everyone to mute their computers, mute the audio.
Mute.
And just listen to and watch Kah-Wai presentations. And in case you gotta say something, you can just unmute yourself. And after the presentation, I just will have a few announcements to make. All right, Kah-Wai, it's all yours.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you for hosting me today. So I bet you guys still remember me. So I'm going to skip the introduction. So I'm Kah-Wai, and I'm the landscape photographer in New Jersey today. So last time we talked about the landscape photography in general, and today I want to tell you more about how to use the filters in landscape photography, and especially the long exposure photography. So the first question is that why do we need filters? It's so easy to say that filters are outdated and unnecessary in the digital era of photography. People have been saying that we have the very advanced camera today and very advanced post-processing tool. We don't need the filters anymore. But let's take a look at this example and see why we still need the filters in the digital era of photography. So in most of the landscape situation, if you look at the wider scenes, you look at this image here, the human eye and the camera don't see in the same way. And one of the biggest challenges in landscape photography is to manage the contrast of in the scenes. For example, this picture here, the sky is too bright and the ground is too dark. So contrast is tough to manage, especially in the brighter days and in certain scenery. But there are a few ways to work around this. Of course, there are easy way, there are hard way, there are cheap way, there are more expensive way. And one of the easiest way, of course, is to spend money to get the graduated neutral density filter. So this is with the use of a 5-stop graduated neutral density filters to handle the contrast between the sky and the ground. And another common scenes that involve the use of filters is waterscape, either the waterfall, the river, the beach. As you can see in this image here, this is the ice beach or diamond beach in Iceland. But however, in this picture here, you can see the ice, the water, they blend to each other. It looks so messy to me. And if you want to make your water dance, if you want to make your image look impressive, you have to use a longer exposure to make your water looks different. And in this case here, with the use of long exposure, around 1 second exposure, when the wave is going back to the ocean, so the movement of the wave is now become the trail, and that is now become the leading line and the foreground elements here. So let's take a look into another example here. This is one of the most beautiful fishing village in Lofoten. However, with the less appealing weather conditions, too much detail in the sky for me, and too much ripple in the water, they are very distracting. And by drawing out your exposure time with neutral density filter, it will smoothen out the ripple in the water and smoothen out the movement of the cloud. So make it the resulting image much cleaner and significantly improved. So this picture worth 1,000 words. And filters is not only an essential tool in fixing the problem that we encounter in landscape photography, but also a creative tool that allows us to see something that's different from our eye. And so there are many filters in the film era, and many of them are just vanished from the market because we don't need them anymore in the digital photography. But when we talk about the landscape photography, three of these three filters here are the most commonly used, and they are still using that all the time in landscape photography. The circular polarizer, CPL, the graduated neutral density filter, the GND, or we call it ND grad or split ND, and the neutral density filters. So we use polarizer to reduce the refractions from the non-metallic surface, and then we use the graduated neutral density filters to handle the contrast between the sky and the ground. And ND filters, it's just like sunglasses for the camera. We use it to lengthen the exposure time. And it's too easy to think that filters are old-fashioned and unnecessary, but some filters, for example, the circular polarizer and the neutral density filter, they can produce the effect they're still impossible to replicate in the post-processing. Okay, so in other words, we can't live without them. Okay, however, the neutral density filter, the GND, can be done by exposure blending or HDR, but it is definitely not obsoleted in the digital era for good reason. And when we think about buying filters, how do we choose filters? There's so many options in the market. So what to consider before buying filters? The types of filters. There are two types of filters: the round filters and the square filters, and the material filters. Some of them make of resin or plastic. Some of them make of glasses. And the lens. What lens you're using? It doesn't matter if you're a camera. It doesn't matter with the lens you're using. Okay. So when we talk about the lens, we talk about the thread size of the lens. Okay, so that decide which filters you have to buy. And so the types of filters based on the shape. So there are two types of filters based on the shape: the square filters, or we call the slot filters, and the round filters, or we call it the screw-in filters. There are pros and cons for both of them. For the round filters, people like it because they're cheap, they're small, they're easy to carry around. However, it's very difficult to stack the filters because they can produce a vignette if you stack 2 or 3 together. And if you want to use the ND, GND, or circular polarizer together, it's kind of difficult to stack them for the round filters. So this is the advantage of the round filters. On the other hand, the square filters, people always complain about their size, they are cumbersome to carry around, they're buggy, they're more expensive. But to my opinion, in landscape photography, square filters are much more practical because first you can adjust the position with GND filters. It's compatible with lens of different thread size. So all you have to do is just buy one set of filters, and it can use on all your lenses. And it's stackable without a vignette, and it's easy to use in combinations of GND, ND, and CPL together. Okay, so if we take the NISI filters as an example, I'm not selling filters here, but I just want you to understand how we can pick the filters and how we can pick the filters when we decide to buy the filters. So in general, in most of the case, in most common situation, we use this. Let me pull out a pen. So this is a 100mm system here. So this is the most commonly used square filter system. It can fit for all your lens with the thread size of 95mm or smaller than 95mm. So in theory, it fits, one set of filters can fit all your lenses. Okay, And if you are using a micro four thirds lens, you do need a 100mm system. You can go for the smaller 75mm system. So these are slightly smaller and easier to carry around for you if you do need the bigger system. However, if you're using the ultra wide angle lens like Canon 11-24, Nikon 14-24, this lens has a bulging front element. You cannot use a 100mm system. You cannot use the 75mm system. You have to use the bigger 150 or 180mm system. So this guy is a big, very big in size. So when you pick the filters, when you are planning to buy the filters, the thread size and the front elements of your lens is your main concern. Okay. So as I mentioned, as long as you're using the lens with the thread size smaller than 82mm, you can use this 100mm system. Okay. However, if you are using the ultra wide angle lens, like those lenses that list here, you have to use a big 150 or 180mm system. So, so when you look at my camera bag, I always have 4 of these filters in my camera bag. For the GND, I have the 3-stop soft and 5-stop soft GND, and for the ND filter, I have a 6 and 10-stop ND filters, and of course, a filters holder together with the CPR. So let's go into detail about each of them and what we can do with those filters. So polarizer, we use it to control or reduce the refraction from non-metallic surface. For example, the water, the ice, the rocks, the glass, and the leaf. And it's also helps us to see through the windows or the water by excluding the refractive light. And polarizer also can restore the saturation, for example, the blue sky, the green leaf, and even the rainbow. If you see the rainbow, you can use the polarizer to enhance the saturation of the rainbow. And polarizer can also reduce the shutter speed. If you look at the polarizer here, it's a little bit dark, so it can reduce the shutter speed by 1 to 2 stops. Depends on the brand. For example, the Nisi polarizer can reduce the shutter speed by 1.5 stops. Some polarizers, some brand, they're darker, so it is 2 stops. Some polarizer, some brand is not so dark, it's about 1 stop. So it depends on the brand. And so whenever we want to take a photo through the shop windows or the glasses, but you couldn't work out how to cut off the refraction. For example, the example on this side here, or you have been to the observation deck on in the Empire State Building or top of rock, but you're trapped behind a window that has so many stray light shining into the glasses. You couldn't get a good shot on what was on the other side. In most of the case, the polarizer can easily solve this issue by reducing all this unwanted refraction of the window. Okay. And in landscape photography, we often use the polarizer to cut off the unwanted refraction from the non-metallic surface, like the glasses or the algae in this picture here, or even the water. So the water that refracts the sky. So once you cut off the refraction, you can easily see things like under the water. Okay, and it also helps to restore the saturation of those things, the glasses, and the blue sky. So if you look at the video here, it shows you how CPL is so exceptionally powerful by cutting off the amount of refraction of the water. So with no polarizing effect and with polarizing effect, you can see that with the polarizer, with the polarizing effect, you can see all the tadpoles under the water. So people also complain that it's so difficult to use a polarizer, because when you rotate the polarizer, sometimes you complain that it's hard to see the effect. It's hard to see where it changes. But one quick tips on how to use a polarizer is rotate very fast. Okay, so when you point at something, if you rotate the polarizer very fast, very quick, and then you can see the changes. For example, in this area here, you can easily see the changes in certain area in your image. And then once you find where is the area that is changing, then you rotate slowly to fine tune the effect that you want. Okay, so if you can't see the effect, rotate very fast to preview the changes. So there's some case that we cannot use the polarizer. For example, the polarizer will have no effect in the front light or back light. So when you're shooting facing the sun, or when you're shooting, or when the sun is behind you, the polarizer will have no effect at all. Okay, and the polarizer cannot be used on the ultra wide angle lens because the sky will have uneven blue tone. One side of the sky can have a stronger polarizing effect. Another side of the sky will have little or no polarizing effect. So you will see the dark blue on one side, the bright blue on the other side. So if this happens, most of the case is with the ultra wide angle lens. Just remove your polarizer. And polarizer is not suitable when you want to take a multiple image to be stitched into panorama. Okay, again, this so the panorama is somehow similar to ultra wide angle view. Okay, so you might get the uneven blue over the sky. And polarizer cannot be used on the window or the glasses that are uneven, tinted or coded. For example, the airplane window, you cannot use the polarizer to cut off the unwanted refraction through the airplane window because the airplane window are coded and it will result in a rainbow or ripple effect. Okay. Okay, so yeah, so I'm done with the polarizer. If you have any question on polarizer, you feel free to interrupt. Feel free to unmute your mic and ask. Okay. If not, then I will proceed with the second part of the talk about the graduated neutral density filters. As I mentioned earlier in my presentation, in most situations in landscape photography, we have to deal with contrast, especially when we are shooting the sky and the ground together. Okay, so there are many ways to deal with contrast. The most primitive way is to use a black card technique. I believe some of you guys know about this technique by just using a black card and just dodge up and down in front of a lens to darken the sky. So this is the cheapest way, although it requires some practice and patience. And of course, you want the easier way. The easier way is to spend money to buy the graduated neutral density filter. So this is a piece of rectangular glasses, darker in the upper half and transparent in the lower half. The upper half is used to reduce the light in the sky. Okay. And the other way is to use a post-processing, either the exposure blending. You take two shots, one shot to the sky, and then one shot to the ground. And then in the Photoshop or Lightroom, you blend both of them together. Okay. Or you can do it with HDR. Okay. So, so just an example here, this is the most common situation we encounter in landscape photography, the overexposed sky and underexposed ground. So in this case here, I use the graduated neutral density filters to darken the sky. Okay. So just a comparison image here without the GND, just a regular shot, the overexposed sky will result in the clipping in your histogram. So this guy here cannot be recovered even in the Photoshop because it's clipping. Okay, there's no more information here. So with the use of the soft GND, the graduated neutral density filters, we're able to push those clipping information back to the midtone. Okay, result in a well exposed and pleasing looking image. And there are many different types of graduated neutral density filters. We have soft GND, hard GND, reverse GNDs, and medium GND. The soft, the hard, the reverse, and the medium here refer to the transitions. Okay, the transition between the dark and the transparent area. Okay, and we use the soft GND. The soft GND has a long transition between the dark and the transparent area. We use it when there's no definite horizon line in between the sky and the ground. Okay, for the hard GND, there's a very short transition between the sky and the ground. So we use it when there's a very well-defined horizon line. For example, when we are shooting the sea level, the skyline up to the sunset or before the sunrise. Okay, the medium GND is somehow in between the soft and hard, while reverse GND has the darkest part in the middle of the glasses. We use it to shoot the sunrise, where the sun is in the middle of your image. So we use the reverse GND to handle the brightest part of your image here. Okay. And just another example here, the overexposed sky produce a clipping in your histogram, while with the use of soft GND filters, we are able to push back all this clipping information back to the midtone, so resulting in a well-exposed image. And so this is the sunrise. I'm not sure if it's sunrise or sunset, but the sun is right in the middle of your image here. Okay, so in this case, we have to use the reverse GND. If you remember in the earlier slide, the reverse GND has the darkest part in the middle of the glasses. So with the use of the reverse GND, we're able to restore the clipping information in the middle of the image. Okay, so this is without and with the use of the four-stop reverse GND. And GND, the graduated neutral dense filters, are manufactured in different calibrated density. You can get them from some brand produce the one stop, some brand even produce a 6-stop. So basically, you can get them from 1 stop to all the way to 5 or 6 stop. However, which GND to use, it depends on the contrast between the sky and the ground, and in the general condition, the front lighting. When the sun is behind you, the front lighting is the contrast is between the sky and the ground is about 1 to 2.5 stops. If it's a side lighting, when the sun is on the side, the contrast between the sky and the ground is about 2 to 4 stops. While backlighting, where the sun is in front of you, the contrast is about 3 to 5 stops. Okay. In the worst case, if you're shooting toward the sun, in the blue sky, you can go up to 7 or even 8 stops. So as you can see here, in most of the situation in landscape photography, you have to handle the contrast between 1 to about 8 stops. Okay, so that's being said, you need something that can handle the contrast between 1 and 8 stops. But it's not so practical that you buy all the filters 1 to 6 stops, and with hard and soft and medium GND, and you end up in buying like 20 pieces of the glasses and bring it to the field and don't know what to do with them. So what I recommend that everyone, if you are in the market of buying the filters, the GND filters, what I recommend is these 2 pieces of filters, a 3-stop and a 5-stop soft GND. Okay, so the reason is very simple. If you look at the design of the GND filters, for example, this one here, the 3-stop soft GND filter, the darkest part here is 3-stop, okay? And then it's gradually come to 2-stop around here. And then it's gradually come to 1 stop around here, maybe half a stop here, and then 0 stop here, okay? So if you slide your filters up and down in your folder, if you push it all the way down, you can use it to handle 3-stop. If you push it up a little bit, you can use it to handle 2-stop. If you push it a little bit more, you can handle the contrast of 1 stop. Okay, so a 3-stop GND can serve to reduce the contrast of 3, 2, and 1 stop. Okay, so if you have a 5-stop GND, similarly, the upper part here is the 5-stop. It's gradually come to 4 stop, and here's around 3 stop. So to the smaller extent, this is 2, 1, half, and then 0 stop. So again, if you push all the way down, you can use it to handle the 5-stop. If you push it up a little bit more, you can use it at 4 stop. If you push a little bit up more, you can use it at 3 stop. Okay, so a 5-stop GND can handle the contrast of 5, 4, and 3 stop. What about 6 stop? What about 7 stop? What about 8 stop? Easy. If you stack both together, you get 5 plus 3 stop, 8 stop. Okay. If you push this up a little bit more, you can handle the contrast between 5 plus 2 stop, 7 stop. Push up a little bit, you can handle the contrast between 5 plus 1, 6 stop. So with these 2 pieces of the GND, you can handle the contrast from 1 stop to 8 stop. Okay, so you don't have to buy everything. You just need these 2 pieces of filters in your camera bag. And if you have these 2 pieces of filters in the camera bag, you can also use it to handle the refraction. Because when you're shooting a refraction, you have overexposed sky and the overexposed water. Okay, in this case here, you can use the 5 stop to darken the sky, and then the 3 stop GND, put it upside down to darken the water, and this result in a pleasing and well exposed image. And how to tell the contrast between the sky and the ground? If you look at the image here, or when you stand outside, how to tell what is the contrast between the sky and the ground? Is it a 2 stop? Is it a 3 stop? Most people just guess it, but if you want a precise estimation of the contrast, here is a little trick. Okay, so just put your camera in the manual mode, and I don't care about f-stop or ISO, but dial your exposure time, dial your shutter speed until this pointer in the EV go to 0. Okay. Once you're done with it, point your camera to the sky. Okay, and look at the pointer in the EV value here. If it's go to 3, which means that the contrast between the sky and the ground are 3 stop. Then you use a 3 stop GND. Okay. So what if the contrast is beyond 3 stop? Because most of the camera just show the EV value from -3 to 3. So it's easy. Just go back to the step 1 here. So dial your exposure time to -3. And then go to the next step. Point your camera to the sky. If it's go to 2, which means that the contrast is 5 stop. If it's go to 3, then the contrast is 6 stop. Okay, so this is a little trick that you to just allow to estimate what is the contrast between the sky and the ground. So it has been, people has been debating over the years that to use or not to use a GND. Some people claim that the GND is expensive, it's so troublesome to carry a few more pieces of the glasses, and the effect also can be achieved by Photoshop. But one of the advantages of using the GND is to save you the time in the post processing, and it's also mean that it's also allow you to it's also allowed to have the exact idea how your final image looks like right away in the field. Okay, so this is the convenience aspect of the GND. And the GND also is consistent from frame to frame. If you want to do the time-lapse photography, it's also save you a lot of time in the post-processing. And most importantly to me, the use of GND tend to give you more organic and more natural result as compared to HDR or exposure blending. But nevertheless, many skillful photographers are able to achieve great result from just using exposure blending in the Photoshop. And you're not to use GND, it's just your personal preference. And so let's go into the long exposure photography. So I believe that I showed this this slide in my presentation last year, but I just want to go through quickly here. People has been content that camera is a recording instrument. We use camera to record what we see with the naked eye. But if you look at the comparison between the human eye and the camera, so let's take a look. What is the difference between them? If you talk about the lens, the widest lens, ever produced for the camera is 4.9 millimeter fisheye lens. The longest lens ever produced for a camera is 5,200 millimeter. This is a huge big monster that no one can ever carry. And while the human eye is equal to a 70 millimeter, another study says is 24 millimeter wide angle lens. Again, as I mentioned earlier, you can't change the lens, right? You can't change the lens of your eye. It's a fixed lens. It's a fixed wide angle lens. This area, hello?
I can hear you.
You can hear me because I got a message like the Zoom is quick, so you guys are okay, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so for the ISO of the camera, the best camera we have today, we can go as low as 50, we can go as high as 4 million. Human eye has the ISO range from 1 to 800. And aperture of the lens, it depends on the optical design. It can go from 0.9, 1.2, it can go as small as 32, 40, 46, or even 60 something. It depends on the optical design of the lens. While the human eye has an aperture of 2.1 to 8.3. And when we talk about shutter speed, the camera can go as fast as 1 over 8,000 seconds. It can go as slow as you want. Human eye has a shutter speed of about 1 over 100 to 1 over 200 seconds. And when we talk about the resolution, this camera here, this is a phase one XT camera. This is a $50,000 camera. If you're interested to buy one of this camera, talk to me. I'm happy to entertain you. Okay. So this camera here has the resolution of 150 megapixel, a lot of megapixel. But in comparison, human eye has a resolution of 576 megapixel, which is 3 times higher than this $50,000 camera. So diameter range of the camera can range from 8 to 11 stops. Some of the best camera in the world can reach up to like 12 or 13 stops, while the diameter range of the human eye can reach up to 14 stops. And in theory, if we have the adjustable pupil, we can go up to 24 stops, which is infinity. So in theory, the diameter range of the human eye is infinity. And if you convert all this figure into camera, if our eye is a camera, it costs that much, okay? So we are not carrying a cheap camera. We have a very expensive camera, or we have two very expensive cameras. So what I'm trying to tell is that camera is not just a recording instrument, it's a creative tool that allows to see the unseen. For example, with the use of a very high shutter speed, the camera can freeze the moment when a bald eagle catching a fish, but you can't see those moments with a human eye. By using a very slow shutter speed, like long exposure photography, camera can accumulate the lights and the color that is changing over the time in one single image, but we cannot see those with the naked eye, okay? So that's why we often say that landscape photography is the art of seeing the unseen. We always use the technique, for example, long exposure photography that allows us to see something that's not possible with naked eye. And what is long exposure photography? If you look at the Wikipedia, there's a long definition here. Long exposure photography involves the use of long duration shutter speed to sharply capture the stationary elements of image while blurring, obscuring the moving elements. So long story here, but the key is that the moving element, the movement. So long exposure photography capture one element that the conventional photography does not. There's a time. So everything's about long exposure. It's about the movement and the time. Okay, just an example here. This is the long exposure of 180-second exposure in Iceland. So a creative long exposure is not intended to be done by simply using a long exposure to shoot something. For example, I turn off the light and use my camera to shoot 5-minute exposure of my table or the chair. So this is not the long exposure. There's no creative intention behind this image. What you can see here is that my intention of using a long exposure, 180 seconds, is to capture the motion blur of the moving cloud. Okay, at the same time, it also smoothen the flowing water and smoothen the flowing water. So this is my intention of using the long exposure to capture those moving elements or the movement all the time. So the long exposure is relative term. So we are talking about moving element. So in the previous slide here, so the sky is the cloud is moving slowly. So we need very long exposure to capture the movement. However, the wave here is moving much faster than the cloud. So this is the exposure time of half a second. Half a second exposure, just slightly longer than less than 10 or 100 of a second exposure, but this short exposure still create the movement, which is the movement of the wave here. So everything is relatively static because everything here, the mountains, the rock here, they are not moving. Okay, so this is the case that a slow exposure of half a second, but still create the sense of motion. But sometimes you need to go for longer exposure to create the motion. For example, here, 180-second exposure. So my intention to create the motion blur of this slowly moving cloud. Okay. So long exposure can do a lot of things in landscape photography. As you can see from the example just now, it's allowed to create the dynamic scenes of the moving element, especially the cloud and the water. So these are the most common elements in long exposure photography, and smoothing and blurring the water, okay, and enhance the reflection. It also helps us distract, remove the distracting element. I'm going to talk more about this later on, and it also helps us to create the impressionist or minimalist styles of photography. So at this point here, you can see that it's all about movement, all about the motion and the time. So how to go for longer exposure? You can play with the setting of the camera. As you know, you can step down the aperture, or you can lower the ISO, or you can shoot in the low light condition, for example, during the golden hour or blue hour or the twilight or the overcast day. So which allow to use the longer exposure because of low light condition. However, in landscape photography, if you want to get a really long exposure, or if you want to have more control over your exposure time, the best way is to spend money, okay, to use the filters. So as I mentioned earlier, you can use the polarizers to step down about 1 to 2 stops, okay? If you want to go for longer exposure, you have to use the neutral density filters, okay? So this guy here serves to block the light coming into the sensor. So you need the long exposure to compensate the loss of the light. So ND filters come with different darkness level. Again, just like the GND, you can get them from 1 stop, 2 stop, 3 stop, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12, 15, 18, and 20 stop. You can get from 1 stop to all the way to 20 stop. However, you do need to buy all of these filters, okay? Because most of them, they are not very useful. In landscape photography, the most commonly used ND filters are 3, 6, and 10 stop. 3 stop length exposure by 8 times. 6 stop length exposure by 60 times. Let's make it simpler. Let's say 60 times. 10 stop length exposure by about 1,000 times, okay? So as you can see here, they serve for different purpose. When we're shooting a waterscape photography, like the wave or the waterfall, the river, in most of the case, we often rely on the 3 stop and the 6 stop. However, if you want to do the long exposure, like 2 or 3 minutes or 5-minute exposure, you may have to use the 10 stop ND filters. And just a quick tip here. If you have not used any ND filters before, if you want to buy the first ND filters in your life, so I would suggest you to get a 6 stop ND filter. This is the most commonly used ND filters, okay? If you want to buy the second ND filter in your life, 10 stop, go for 10 stop. So these two are the most important ND filters in your camera bag. Okay, I would suggest you to just keep the 3 stop, because with today's camera, you can easily adjust 3 stop up or 3 stop down with the ISO or with the aperture. Okay, so you can just skip this. 6 and 10 stop is the most important tool in your camera bag. So long exposure photography, as I mentioned earlier, is allowed to create the motion, the dynamism in your landscape photography. Let's take a look at the example here. This is 1/22 exposure. There's nothing wrong about this image here. Nice location, nice light in the early morning during the sunrise, nice cloud here. But what if you use a longer exposure? So in this case here, we use a 10 stop anti-filters, lengthen exposure time by about 1,000 times. So this is the resulting image. The moving cloud here, result create the motion blur. The moving cloud create the motion blur of the cloud. They bring out the movement. You can feel that the cloud is moving from one side to the other side. Okay, this create a sense of motion. Okay, but and then in this image here, something they are moving, which is the cloud, something they are not moving, which is the cabin, the mountain here. So with the use of long exposure, we also create the visual contrast between the motion, between the moving and non-moving element. Something they are moving, something they are not moving. Okay, so this is called a visual contrast. And at the same time, with the use of long exposure, we also smoothen the water, the ripple, they are all gone, result in a very clean image. So this is the power of long exposure photography. We introduce the elements of dynamism, we create the visual contrast, we also make the image cleaner and more simple. So another example here, the 30-second exposure, create the motion blur of the cloud that bring out the movement. So again, it's create the visual contrast between the moving element and non-moving element. At the same time, it's smoothen the water here, make it less distracting to the viewer eye. And just an example here, moving cloud, create the visual contrast between moving and non-moving element. And long exposure also create a so-called gas and host relationship. If you look at this image here, if I ask you which one is the main subject, obviously it is the church here, because it represents the location here. It's unique to this image. Okay, you cannot find this church in New York City or in Connecticut. So this is iconic for this image or for this location. While the sky, the cloud, the water here, those guys are secondary element, or we call them gas. So with the use of long exposure photography, we blur out the secondary element, the sky, and the ripple of water, make it less distracting to the viewer eye. This in turn will make your host or the main subject stand out from the cloud. So this is what I call a gas and host relationship, or yeah. So long exposure also lend itself to clean, simple, and millimeter styles of composition when you blur out all the moving elements. For example, here a 10-stop anti-filters, 200-second exposure, the moving cloud, the moving water, result in a very simple and minimalist styles of image. And how we can use the long exposure to remove the distracting element. For example, the image here, this is from Kunming in China. In the open hour, you can only shoot this image in the open hour. But in the open hour, there are thousands of people here walking in front of the camera. There are thousands of birds here flying around. There are hundreds of birds moving around here. You can't get a clean shot of this place. Never. Okay. But with the use of very long exposure, for example, here, 200 240 second exposure with the 10-stop anti-filters, it's allow you to. So it's allowed to create a very clean image. It's blur all the moving people, all the moving birds and birds, result in a very clean and simple image. So you can just make a direct comparison without the long exposure and with the use of the long exposure. Okay. And when we use when we use a 10-stop anti-filters, if you ever see a 10-stop anti-filter, is a piece of very dark glasses. So if you look through this 10-stop anti-filter, you can't see anything because it's so dark. Same for the camera. When you put it in front of the camera cannot see anything, which means that it will mess up the exposure time. Okay. So when you use a 10-stop anti-filter, before you install the filter in front of the camera, you have to do these 3 simple steps. First, compose your image, and then put your camera on a tripod, compose your image, and then lock the tripod. Once you compose your image, focus. You can do the autofocus and then switch to manual focus to lock the focus. And then you have to calculate the exposure time. So how to calculate exposure time, I'm going to talk about it in the next few slides. So once you have done with the step 1, 2, 3 here, then you install the filters and set the camera in shot. Okay. So how to calculate the exposure time? The easiest way to calculate exposure time is to use your calculator, your brain. Okay. So if you use an anti-10-stop filters, so it's length of exposure time by 1,000 times. So easy, just base shutter speed times 1,000. If you have 1/10 of a second times 1,000, which is about 100 seconds or 1 minute and 40 seconds. If you have 1/30 second exposed, 1/30 second times 1,000, which is 30 seconds. Okay. If you can calculate, then you have to use something else. So you can go online, go to Google and just Google for long exposure calculation chart. Okay, so it's easy to use it. So for example, you are using a 10-stop anti-filters, and if your base shutter speed, for example, is 1/8 second exposure, just look at what is your resulting exposure time, 120 seconds, 128 second exposure. Okay. Another way to is to use the apps for the long exposure calculation. So there are many apps that have the calculator. For example, the LE calculator or PhotoPill. So for example, I show the PhotoPill apps here. If you go to exposure and if you go to set your exposure time and the anti-filter that you're using, and it will give you the resulting exposure time. Okay, if you have a 1/10 of a second exposure with the use of 10-stop anti-filter, you have to use a 1 minute and 42 second exposure. And another technique sounds a little bit complicated at the beginning, but it's very useful in certain cases. So this is what I call the 1 second exposure technique. You might be confused a little bit, but let's take some time to digest this technique. This is a very simple 3-step technique. So step number 1, set your camera to the M mode and the ISO to 6400 and use 1 second to take a shot. Okay, so once you take a shot, check the photo. If the photo is well exposed, then go to the next step. Switch to B mode, bulk mode, and switch the ISO from 6400 to ISO 100. And then switch to 1 second exposure to 1 minute exposure. This is your resulting shot. Okay, just an example here. This is my test shot here, ISO 6400, 1 second exposure. Once I take this test shot, I see that it's a bit noisy because ISO 6400, but the exposure is well exposed, so everything looks right in the histogram. So once I get this shot, I switch the ISO to 100, and 1 second correspond to 1 minute. So this is your resulting shot. So this is called a 1 second exposure technique. What if 1 second is underexposed? Go to 2 seconds. Okay, 2 seconds correspond to 2 minutes. What is 2 seconds still underexposed? Go to 3 seconds. 3 seconds correspond to 3 minutes. What is 1 second is overexposed? Go to half a second. Half a second correspond to half a minute. Okay. So on and so forth. So the principle of this technique is that there are 6 stop decrement from ISO 6400 to ISO 100. 64 to 33, 1 stop. 32 to 16, 2 stop. 16 to 800, 3 stop. 800, 400, 4 stop. 400 to 200, 5 stop. 200 to 100, 6 stop. This is a 6 stop decrement in ISO. 6 stop decrement result in 2 to the power of 6, which is 64 times decrease in the exposure. On the other hand, 1 minute is 60 seconds, right? So 1 minute is 60 times longer than 1 second. So therefore, 60 times increase in exposure time compensate the 60 times decrease in ISO sensitivity. So if you are confused what I'm talking, I'm going to send you the handout after the presentation today. So just take some time to digest the technique. So this is the quick technique that we use to calculate the exposure time when we are using for example, the ND10 stop filters. You can also use this technique to shoot the night scale photography. In most of the case, when we shoot the night scale photography, we just give a guess. Okay, for example, we are shooting the cityscape at night with the firework. We often guess that should we use a 30-second exposure, 1 minute or 2 minute exposure. Let's take a test shot and then keep trying an arrow. Okay, so if you use this 1 second exposure technique, it's allowed you to make a quick decision on what exposure time you may need for this particular shot. Okay. Okay, so let's go into waterscape photography. So water changes appearance as you extend the exposure time. This is 1/10 of a second exposure. You can see a lot of short line in the water. So there are a lot of detail in the water, which result in a very messy image. Okay, so when you go to 1/6 of a second, it's still a lot of detail in the water. But if you go for longer exposure, for example, half a second, 1 second or 2 second exposure, you can see the short line just now are joining each other and become a longer line. And this line is kind of like directional. It's pointing toward one direction from upper right to the lower left. Okay, so in landscape photography, in waterscape photography, we like this range of exposure time, half a second to 2 second exposure, because the water looks directional, the water looks highly dynamic. It looks like the water is flowing from one point to the other point. If you go for longer exposure, let's say 5 second exposure, 10 second, you see that the line start disappearing. And with 15 second exposure, the line almost gone. And with 20 second or more, the line are completely gone. And the water is very smooth and misty. So that's being said, if you want to shoot waterscape, you don't need ridiculously long exposure. If you want to make your water looks directional, looks like it's flowing, looks dynamism, all you need is half a second to 2 second exposure. If you want to make a water look smooth, simple, dreamy, romantic, whatever, all you need is 10 to 20 second exposure. As simple as that. This is all you have to remember. Okay. So in most of the case, we often rely on ND filters to fine-tune the exposure time. And as I mentioned earlier, 6-stop ND filter is the most practical ND filters in when you're shooting the waterscape. Okay, and if you look at most of my waterscape in my presentation, most of them are range from half a second to 2 second exposure because the water looks highly dynamic. The water looks like it's flowing. And sometimes we use the long exposure to smoothen water and have refraction. For example, the image here, you can see that the water is the refraction is kind of distracted by the ripple. There's so much detail in the refraction. But when you use the long exposure, in this case, if we use the 10-stop anti-filters, we can smoothen the water. And when the ripple is all gone, the refraction enhanced. At the same time, with the use of long exposure, it also bring out the sense of movement of the cloud here. Okay, and this is another example here with the use of 10-stop anti-filters. This allows us to lengthen exposure time to about 8 seconds. You see that all the ripples gone, result in a very simple and clean images. Just an example here with the use of 120-second exposure, smoothen the water, enhance the refraction at the same time to bring out the movement of the cloud here and also in the refraction. Okay, so this is my intentions of using long exposure. The same principles, half a second to 2 second exposure, also apply to the seascape photography. So the first thing I want to discuss with you is the outgoing wave, how to shoot the outgoing wave. I mean, when the wave is going back to the ocean. So for example, here, this is the 10-second exposure. When the wave is going back to the ocean, moving back to the ocean, with a half a second to 2 second exposure, is allowed to create those streak of the wave that looks highly dynamic. Okay, so you can just make a comparison here without and with the use of long exposure. So how these line form? So let's take a look at this video. So do you see it? Those lines are formed by those white form. Okay, when those white form flowing in, and then when the white form flowing back to the ocean, it's formed the nice line that leaves the streak in your image. Just look at the example here. So see that when the wave is going back, those white form forming the nice line back into the ocean. So this video here, so this is my client in Iceland. So this is the resulting image from the scene just now. See those white form when they're moving back to the ocean. So they are going to move over the ice. So it leaves the streak in your images. Okay. So just look one more time here. Hello, you guys here? Everything okay?
See you. Okay.
Okay, so because
for a second.
Okay, because it keep popping out the box, like the zoom quick unexpectedly. Okay. Okay, so let's move forward. Sorry, let me share the screen again. So This is an example here. This is a beach of photon.
Okay, we can see that right now.
Okay, let me stop sharing and share it again.
Okay.
Because the Zoom keep giving me the message.
All right. You want me to stop sharing?
Let me try again.
I can stop the sharing. Okay, let me stop it. Okay. Stop share and let's
Can you see
try
my slide?
now. See if it works.
Sorry?
Try it now, see if it works.
Okay, I just share my screen. My screen.
I can see it.
Oh, okay.
Somehow it's not coming up.
Okay. Let me share the screen
Can see
again.
you. That's a good sign.
Mm-hmm.
It says that you started to share the screen, but we just don't see you.
Can you see it right now?
No.
Can you see the screen?
No.
Okay. Let me try to use another computer.
Okay. Are you still there? All right. I think we lost him permanently. Well, I don't know if he's going to get back or not, but in case he doesn't, I got only a couple of things to say. One of them is if you have any things to send me for the newsletter, all right, please do so. Pictures or articles, that would be great. And the second thing is that, okay, I think he's coming back.
Is the theme still people?
Still people, yeah. If nothing else, take a self-portrait, so that should work. The other thing is that the show has ended at the Housatonic High School. So I got all your pictures, if you had pictures in it, okay? And, send me an email or let me know how I can get it back to you, okay?
Hello.
Yeah, there you are.
Yeah, I switched the computer, so give me a second to open the presentation.
Okay, let's see if that's. Okay, all right, seems to be working. Seeing a PowerPoint presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, that looks much better.
Okay, I believe it's the computer doesn't
Yeah, doesn't follow orders.
doesn't like the zoom. Yeah. Okay, so this is the image from Lofoten in Norway. If you look at the image here, it's a nice location. There are nice mountains in the background. However, the beach here is quite empty. There's no foreground elements, nothing, just blank, empty. So in this case here, I use the same principle, 1/2 second to 2 second exposure. In this case here is 1 second exposure. When the wave is moving back to the ocean, it's create the streak of the wave that become the leading line and the foreground element. The same case here. So this is during the high tide when everything is deep under the water. So there's nothing interesting to be a foreground element. So I use a movement of wave. When the wave is moving back to the ocean, it's leave the streak of the wave that has now become a leading line and the foreground element. So another way you can shoot the wave is the incoming wave. When the wave is coming toward your camera, for example here. So if you look at this image here, you see that there's elevation here. So I could kind of predict that when a wave is moving in, it will move in like the river, follow the elevation here. So in fact, with the use of 6-stop anti-filters, in fact, my prediction is correct. When the wave is moving in, it's moving in like the river. So this is just the comparison without and with the use of long exposure, or without or with the presence of the wave. So another example here, if you look at the terrain here, there's an elevation here, and there's a glove here, and there's another elevation here. I can kind of predict that when the wave is coming in, it will jump into the glove, and then it will jump out again. Okay. So in fact, my prediction is correct. When the wave is moving in, it will move into the glove, and then it will move out again. So this results in a highly dynamic looking foreground elements. So I would suggest that when you're shooting the seascape, the waterscape, you don't have to be in Norway or Iceland. You can go to the beach near your house, New Jersey or Connecticut. So as long as you get you know how to use the long exposure, how to catch the wave, and how to observe the terrain, like the rocks here. So you are able to get a nice image with a nice looking wave. So we have been talking about all types of filters, how to use the filters, how to use to fix the problem. And the bottom line is that when you're shooting the landscape, you have to analyze your landscape and see what's the problem and what you can use to fix the problem. Okay. For example, here, this image here, there are a few problems here. So first one, the light is not perfect, of course, because this image was taken in the middle of the day, it's harsh light. And the second thing is that the cloud looks a patch here and there. It's kind of distracting to me. And the other thing is the contrast between the sky and the ground. The sky is obviously brighter than the ground. And the other problem is the ripple of water. It looks so distracting with all the ripple in the water. So how to fix all these problems? So the lights, so we come back here in the later of the day when the sun is low, during the sunset. So the mountains glow in the sunset. And then we can use the graduated neutral density filter to fix the contrast between the sky and the ground. And then the next thing is the cloud. So we use a 10 stop ND filters, very long exposure, 240-second exposure here to create the motion blur of the cloud. So this brings the movement at the same time, simplify the sky, okay, make it less distracting. At the same time, the long exposure also remove all the ripple in the water, okay, result in a very simple image. So this is a without, and with the use of filters. And again, in this image here, the sun is right here. The sun is setting here, right here. So we are shooting the backlighting. So what's the problem here? The overexposed sky, because of backlighting, the sun is here, and the underexposed ground. So we use the GND filter to fix the contrast. Moving cloud, there are tons of cloud in the sky, and the ripple in the water, the reflection of the sky in the water here. So we can use, again, we can use the GND filters to fix the contrast of the sky and the ground. We can use the ND10 stop filters, again, long exposure, to create a motion blur of the sky and to remove the ripple in the water. And we also use a circular polarizer to reduce the reflection in the water. Okay, just a comparison without and with the use of filters. Okay, so that's all I want to discuss today. And if you're interested to look at more of my image, just you're welcome to look at my website, kahwailin.com. So you can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram. And on my website, you can check out the workshop that I'm organizing. So this is the schedule for next year. Most of the workshop this year are full, and this is for next year. You're interested, just feel free to email me. And if you want to spend money, welcome to my camera store. I have a little online store here. You can use the discount code here to take 10% off for most of the product. Okay. So with that, I will stop sharing here and take the question. Thank you.
Laszlo, you're on mute.
Thank you for letting me know. But I just wanted to thanks Kah-Wai for the great presentation. You know, that's your presentation last time was fantastic, and this excellent as well. A lot to digest, you know, to go through, you know. So thanks a lot for sending us the links and you know, so we can go over that again, over and over it again. So I really appreciate it, or we really appreciate it. Yeah. I just got one quick question for you. I noticed that you use phase 1 and the Fuji medium format camera. And what advantage do you see in those cameras in comparison to, you know, like the regular, like the regular size digital cameras? Besides, you know, they are much heavier and much more expensive, I presume. So
Okay, the reason I'm using them because I don't have to pay anything; they're free. Okay, but of course the advantage of using the medium format camera is the higher megapixel. If you want to print big, it's very useful, or you're going to crop the image, it's very useful because there are a lot of pixels inside, and also better dynamic range. Okay, so this is a pro of using the medium format camera.
Mhm.
On the other side, as you mentioned, they are bigger, they are more cumbersome to carry around. But the phase one camera, they only has the fixed lens, the manual focus fixed lens. So it's not quite convenient when you want to do an ultra wide angle shot or when you want to do like telephoto shot. Yeah. So this is a cons of using the medium format camera. Yeah. I would say medium format is a specialized camera when you want to do the wide angle landscape. Yeah.
It's amazing how much a long exposure photography changes the feel of the scenery. You know, I mean, I was just stunned by some of the pictures from Faroe Island and the other places. Just that's incredible. You know that it's just like a completely different scenery. You know, just with the feel of it. You know,
Yeah, with the long exposure, sometimes you never know what you'll get. Okay, you never know what you'll get after 2 or 3 minutes exposure. So sometimes you have a big surprise.
I noticed that sometimes it changed the color, like the clouds looked more orange.
Yeah, because it's accumulate the lights and the color in one single image. Yeah. Okay. So it looks more saturated. Yeah.
Now, just one thing that was that picture that you took in China where there were lots of people, lots of birds. The second one, was it a composite? You know that.
No, it's a single image. It's a single long exposure image. Yeah.
Was that with the 10 stop?
Yeah, 10 stop. I think is 3 or 4 minute exposure. As long as the people are moving in front of camera, they're going to disappear from the image. Yeah.
Okay.
Unless someone have a rig rest and standing there, not moving for like 1 minute, then that is trouble.
Yeah. Well,
And I think the, correct me if I'm wrong, but the lens that you were using, it was the square one, not the round one most of the time, correct?
Yeah.
And I know you had that one slide that showed the differences, you know, and the pluses and minuses between the square one and the round one. But I mean, you seem to prefer the square. I guess what are, in your own words, like what are some of the, like, what would make you choose the square one? If you were going to make an investment in these lenses, would you definitely pick the square or the round?
I would go for the square because in landscape photography, as you see all this example, most of the time you have to use more than one piece of the filters, ND, GND, and CPL. If you have round filters, it's very difficult to stack them. Okay. For example, if you have a 10 stop ND filters, you want to use CPL. With the 10 stop and CPL, you just can't see anything. So you can't adjust the CPL. And with the round filters and the square, the GND filters, you also can stack them with the round filters. So with the square filters, it's easier for you to stack 2 or 3 or even 4 pieces of filters at the same time. So this is one of the advantage of the square filters. And second, you just need one set of the filters for almost all your lenses. But if you have the round filters, if you have 82 millimeter lens, you have a 67 millimeter lens, you may have to buy like 2 sets, or you may have to carry the step up and step down ring. Yeah.
Will the step up and step down rings work, or would they cause vignetting? Or
it could cause vignette, so that's the problem. So because when you put the ring at the thickness on it in the wide angle, it causes a problem. Okay.
Okay, no, that's really good. And so on the square filters, you had recommended the 3-stop and the 5-stop and in the ND,
GND,
the GND, and then the
Yeah.
ND, it was the 3 and
6
sorry,
and
the
10.
6 and the 10.
Yeah.
But did you have, like, for the CPL filter, did that have a stop or that's just CPL?
So for the Nisi filters, the holder is coming with the CPL. The CPL is built in on the holder. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. So if you're gonna buy filters, I would suggest you to buy the kits. Is cheaper than to buy separately. So for example, the basic, the starter kits come with a 10-stop and a 10-stop ND and a 3-stop GND and the holder and the CPL. If you go to the advanced kit, it's come with a 6 and 10-stop ND and then I think a 3-stop and 5-stop GND. Yeah, a different package. Yeah.
But I haven't seen yet a kit that contains all the ones that you recommended.
I'm not sure. They're kind of weird. So they put different stuff in the kits. So I think the advanced kits, I type it in the chat room, Nisi advanced kits. So I believe this kit has the holder, the CPL, the 6 and 10-stop ND, and the 3-stop GND. I think it's also the 3-stop reverse GND. So it's missing the 5-stop.
Okay.
They wanted to buy it and then to spend more money to buy the extra filters. So they didn't put everything in one set.
Great advice, though. Thank you.
Yeah. Mhm.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, thank you
That's
so much.
you're
Oh,
going
okay.
to put this up?
Hmm?
You're going to put this up on the website?
Yeah. Going to put it up and then Kah-Wai is going to send us some more information and I'm going to send that one to you guys as well.
This requires some real study.
Oh, it does. Yeah. This was not easy. It's a hard science. So, all right. Well, Kah-Wai, thank you so much again for the
Thank
presentation.
you. Yeah.
And hopefully I will see you again in the next season.
Yeah, sure.
And I hope you will get to some interesting places and take some more fascinating pictures.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
a
you.
lot.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot. You guys want to stay for a minute, so I can talk to you about business?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Kah-Wai.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. It's really not much. I just want to say it again that send me some pictures, any kind of pictures, people's pictures, what I mean, for the newsletter, or if you can come up with some articles, like if you have a parrot who is watching your Zoom meeting, sometimes.
I do have a ferret watching my Zoom meeting. He's very interested in what's going on screen.
Okay.
I couldn't keep him out of here.
Send me something, okay, so we can make the newsletter a little bit more interesting. And again, I want to say that I know that some of you have got you had pictures in that show at the Housatonic High School. So I got your pictures. Just try to make some arrangements with me, how to get it back to you, because
Are you driving through Lakeville?
I will do anything right now because it's taking up half of my office, that's all these pictures.
Awesome. Just swing by, ring the doorbell.
Okay, will do.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you, Laszlo, for everything you're doing.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Laszlo.
guys. I don't know why we didn't end up with more people. This was very technical, I
Yeah.
think, but it was very, very good, useful information. You can just change the look of a scenery.
Yeah.
And it goes for just about any kind of scenery with a long exposure. Yeah, as long as you get clouds in there, you know, you take a 1 minute exposure, 2 minute exposure, you know, it will change everything. It will just like, I don't know, smooth out things. It will give you a real nice feeling. So,
Yeah.
and Heidi, because you don't want to spend so much money on those filters, you know, just break a window glass, put some candle under it, blacken it up, you know, hold it in front of your lens, you know.
I mean, I'm just trying to find like the ones he's talking about. Happy to put it on my wish list for birthdays and stuff like that, because you know, people are always looking for whatever.
Yeah.
But
make sure your Paul knows about it.
oh yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, I just put it on, you know, the Amazon wish list, and somehow I get it between my birthday and Christmas. So a question for you though, and I was a little bit confused about this, and maybe didn't want to ask him, but maybe I missed like the intro because I was just a few minutes late. When he was talking about long exposure, so is he putting on one of these lenses, which, you know, darkens the sky and lightens the ground and all this stuff. In addition to that, right? Sorry, filter. And in addition to that, he's doing long exposure and shooting it on a tripod for 60 seconds. Right? He's doing both, right?
Yeah. So the system that he's using with these square filters, he can put up more, you know, like he can put up a polarizer filter, he can put an ND filter on the top of it, and he can put a GND filter on.
He's layering them.
Like 3 filters in there, which you can kind of do with the other way too, you know, if you get the
I'll be right up.
circular ones. But the problem is that after a while, after you put on the second one, you get some vignetting, okay?
You get what?
Vignetting.
Darkening.
Vignetting. Okay.
Yeah. So I think his system is better, you know, for the more professional look. But you can kind of squeak by putting on 2 of the round filters on yours, you know, because kind of like they can stack on each other, you know. So you can put on a polarizer and you can put on an ND filter on the top of it if you want to. You will get some vignetting, no question about that. You know, even with one filter, if you're using a real wide angle lens, even with one of these round filters, you get some vignetting, just a little bit.
I have one, Laszlo, that has, it's a 5 to 10 stop neutral density with a built-in CPL. Round.
Oh, that is good.
Yeah.
That is.
It's round, so it's one lens, and you can separately control the CPL and the neutral density.
Wow.
But you gotta get over that to the ocean and take some pictures like.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying.
So is he also shooting in long exposure? That's the part I'm confused about. Is he actually?
Yeah. You have to. Yeah.
Okay, so he's doing both. He's got the
When
filter and he's shooting.
filters, that's what makes the long exposure.
So that's why I'm confused.
Yeah, that's why there's less light coming in, so you have to expose longer. That's how it. That's how. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the part I missed. That was like key to
That's how you
understanding this
create
whole
the
thing.
long exposure. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
That was the stupid question I didn't want to ask him, but I feel like he must have explained it before I got there.
I have asked so many stupid questions, and I had. So don't worry about that. All right. Well, I hope everyone is going to have a good night. And I'm going to be finishing up the recording, and we'll talk to you next time.
Sounds good.
All right.
All right. Thank you. See you Tuesday.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.